This episode comes to you as the result of a Patreon poll. Make sure you're voting over on Patreon so you get a say on what goes on this channel. And speaking of which, you guys said that you wanted to see a video focused on the 90s. So I figured what could possibly be more focused on the 90s than the Attitude Era. However, as loved as this time period is, it's kind of weird that we can't agree on when it officially started. So I figure why not round up the usual suspects of what kicked off the Attitude Era and compile them in a little list. Because today... Now, real quick, I do want to give a big thank you to my Patreon supporters like Andy Savardi, Rick Rack, and Baba Yaga. Thank you so much. Before we begin, let's make something perfectly clear. The Attitude Era is not a proper time period, so there's no factual answer as to when it began. It's not like asking when did the year 2008 start, which is why there has never been a universally agreed upon answer for this question. So if you're inclined to believe that there is a definitive date and everybody knows that it started when you say it did, well, just know that that's not the case. But that's what makes this whole debate fun, because when it began is different for different people, with WWE itself even changing its answers from time to time. So, with that being said, let's get into the list. King of the Ring 1996. The earliest entry on this list, June 23rd, 1996, saw Milwaukee, Wisconsin hosting the 10th King of the Ring tournament, and the winner was none other than the Texas Rattlesnake, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Now, one of the most memorable aspects of this victory was Austin's legendary coronation speech, where he first uttered the words, Austin 316. This would go on to be printed on everything from lunchboxes to posters to even t-shirts, which still sell to this day. But moreover, Austin the character and this particular promo serve as prime examples of what the Attitude Era was all about, as the child-friendly atmosphere of the WWF of yesteryear was now being replaced by the more edgy adult content that would rule the roost of the late 90s in wrestling. And these fiery words represented just that, which is exactly why this makes perfect sense as a possible start point. Pillman's got a gun. Several months later, and we would get our next potential beginning date. This time, again, it would feature Stone Cold Steve Austin, but also his former tag team partner, the loose cannon, Brian Pillman. Now, the two would have a long-standing rivalry, dating back to their days as the Hollywood Blondes in WCW. Kayfabe tensions were rising to a critical mass, since Austin and Pillman were allies yet again in WWF. But that is, only until Pillman complimented Austin's rival Bret Hart. This caused Austin to snap and attack Pillman by putting his leg in a chair and kayfabe breaking it, which is now known as Pillmanizing. While Flying Brian was home recovering from the assault, Austin invaded Pillman's house. However, the loose cannon was ready for him and had a fully loaded pistol ready to go. This infamous moment has been both blasted as a time WWF went too far, as well as being hailed as a turning point to which created the Attitude Era with Car Crash TV. Is it both? Is it neither? Well, you be the judge. March 17th, 1997. While Bret Hart officially turned heel simultaneously with Austin's face turn at WrestleMania 13, the seeds of Bret's descent happened before that in March of 1997. Bret had recently won the WWF World title, but almost immediately lost it to Psycho Sid after Austin's interference. Bret was then scheduled to face Austin at WrestleMania. However, before that, he would get his rematch for the title against Sid in a steel cage. But this time, Stone Cold tried to help Bret win the belt in the hopes that their bout would become a championship match. However, The Undertaker, who was already set to contend for the title, would help Sid to retain. Afterwards, an irate Bret was approached by Vince McMahon, who kayfabe-wise was just an announcer at the time, only for Bret to shove him down and hit him with a profanity-laced tirade about the WWF and their management. This set the stage for several components of the Attitude Era. It was the beginning of McMahon being revealed to the public as the owner of the WWF, and a wrestler who was always seen as the biggest babyface hero in the company beginning to go rogue, using foul language and taking the shine off of his squeaky clean babyface veneer. Now, this angle's effectiveness would also spread to other babyfaces like Rocky Maivia, who would join the Nation of Domination as a mega heel not long after this. So, much like how Hulk Hogan's heel turn galvanized a new era for WCW, many would say this too did the exact same thing for WWF. September 15th, 1997. Now, according to one interview with Bruce Pritchard, so take that for whatever it's worth, Shawn Michaels is actually the one to birth the Attitude Era. During a September episode of Monday Night Raw, Vince McMahon uncharacteristically wasn't available to be at the show. Also not in attendance was The Undertaker, who had simply recorded a pre-taped video to play later on for a segment featuring Michaels. And when it came time for this segment, Shawn came down to the ring with a towel stuffed in his shorts and started crotch chopping to indicate what he had done. Furthermore, he also started using foul language and went off script. He called out The Undertaker. Now remember, the Phenom wasn't at the show, so when he didn't come out, it made him look really bad. And with this display of blatant disrespect and unprofessionalism, Vince McMahon was furious and heavily fined Michaels for his actions. However, despite that, the following week, Vince allegedly used the segment as an example of the kind of attitude that he was looking for the company going forward. Survivor Series 1997, the Montreal Screwjob. Now, I've already gone over this plenty, so I don't plan on getting too involved here. But here's the breakdown. BRET was leaving for WCW and unknowingly had the finish of the match changed to screw him over out of the WWF title. Now, many people have cited this as the exact moment that the Attitude Era began, with the curtain now being pulled back on professional wrestling. But as I've already stated in a previous video, I don't view this as day one of the Attitude Era, as many of the reasons that people tend to attribute to this moment just simply aren't true, such as this being the birth of the Mr. McMahon character. As previously stated, the foundations of this heel character were actually set earlier than this, and on top of that, McMahon wouldn't really turn heel on camera until months later. But we'll be getting more into that in a little bit. Now, I get that this is a very convenient incident to point at for many fans, but personally, I'm just not convinced. The Cure for the Common Show. The segment The Cure for the Common Show has often been said to have heralded in the Attitude Era, even by WWE itself. But then again, that all depends on which interview or article you're particularly looking at, because WWE has definitely given more than one answer to this. But The Cure for the Common Show is often cited as a fairly common answer. On the December 15th, 1997 episode of Monday Night Raw, Vince McMahon addressed the audience by saying that no longer will the promotion be bound by the conventional passe rules of the past, and that the time of the superhero and the cliche villains in wrestling was now over, and that WWF would be seeking new ways of storytelling with more complex and robust characters, stating that professional wrestling borrows from all different kinds of entertainment to create the most compelling product. In other words, many took this promise as a declaration that Attitude had begun. WrestleMania 1998. And finally, the latest date on this list claims that everything all began at WrestleMania. Many see the end of Stone Cold's 8-year journey as the beginning of the Attitude Era, because following this, we would see DX taking on new members and turning face, new WWF titles would debut, and of course we would get the Austin McMahon feud kicking off, with McMahon turning heel on Austin. All this stemmed from just one WrestleMania that shifted the tides of the World Wrestling Federation. While yes, it is rather late on the timeline, it's still undeniable that WWF was very different from this point on, because going forward, after his match with The Undertaker, Kane would be solidified as part of the main roster. Also, Shawn Michaels would be out of the main roster, and the competition over Austin's title throughout the rest of the year would elevate brand new main event talents like The Rock. This one pay-per-view is where so much of what the Attitude Era was known for began. But as you can see, this was just one moment of many. Well, there you go, 7 potential start dates for the Attitude Era, but there are definitely more than these. When do you think it started? Let me know down in the comments, and if you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up, as well as supporting me on Patreon, just like these fine folks right here. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, Dave knows.